Before we start today's episode, I want to make sure that everybody in the New York City area knows that we're hosting a live taping of Speaking Soundly tomorrow, Wednesday, April 24th at 7:30 p.m. in New York City at Lincoln Center's David Rubenstein Atrium. I'll be sitting down with the amazing Grammy Award-winning mezzo-soprano Joyce DiDonato. We'll discuss her early beginnings, her life as a singer, the creative process, and some of her more recent projects, including her return to the Met Opera stage this spring in the Hours. And best of all, it's free. That's right. No tickets are needed. Just show up. Again, don't miss our live taping of Speaking Soundly as part of Lincoln Center's Hear It Here podcast series tomorrow, Wednesday, April 24th at 7:30 p.m. in New York City. For more information, check out lincolncenter.org/presents and be sure to follow us on Instagram at SpeakingSNDLY. I'll see you there. Be sure to check out slipdisc.com for the latest inside information on classical music now. Israeli musician Avi Avital is breaking new ground as the first ever classical mandolin soloist to be nominated for a Grammy Award. His signature style and remarkable virtuosity has reignited a fascination with the mandolin as an instrument worthy of center stage. Despite his talents and success, he remains refreshingly honest about the often tedious and solitary nature of practice.
I hated practicing. I'm sorry to admit. I wish I liked it more. I'm good at forcing myself, but when I'm playing with other people in the room, somebody has to stop me and say, like, after 3 hours, please, let's take a break. When I'm alone, I don't like it. I know how to do it now, but as a kid, forget about it.
You're listening to Speaking Soundly, a backstage pass to today's biggest stars of the music world. I'm your host, David Krause, principal trumpet of the Metropolitan Opera. During each episode, you'll hear me speak with inspiring performers about their creative process and the personal journey that led them to the stage. I've been listening to your albums lately while riding the subway here in New York City because the trains have been an absolute mess. They've been crowded and delayed. So while I'm packed into a subway car full of ornery New Yorkers, I have the sound of your mandolin on my AirPods providing this serene soundtrack of happiness and bliss to my miserable commute every day to work. So I can't thank you enough for that.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for taking me through the subways of New York. I love that.
Well, what music do you listen to take you out of your element?
You know, I have created myself this playlist on Spotify that I call Backpack. And I just throw in there whatever recommendation that I hear from a friend, that I pick up on Shazam on the way. I just like throw in there a bunch of stuff. And then when I have a quiet moment, that's where I go to. Just the discovery of new things is my go-to at the moment.
Well, something that I discovered about your music that I really love is the way you shape and phrase the momentum, the direction, particularly in Baroque music. It sounds joyous and fun. Is it as fun for you to play as it is for me to listen to?
Of course, yes. Otherwise, what am I doing? Thank you for mentioning the phrasing. This is indeed something, I think as a mandolin player, I had to find a way to play music which is more convincing, more effective, for the standard I would put myself if I played another instrument. It feels like if I had a burden with this instrument to prove that it can phrase, that it can do legato, that it can be as expressive as other instruments, that led me to really think about, phrasing and attacca and sound. I think that's the charm about a plucked instrument. I mean, the concept of it is so antique, so it's like the most intuitive way to produce sound. I mean, I see it with little kids when they see the mandolin, or I remember myself also the first interaction that I had with a mandolin, with any plucked instrument, with a harp, with a guitar. The smallest kid would just go and pluck on the string with their fingers. It is that intuitive.
It's immediate too.
It's immediate. You pluck a string and sound comes out. And it's magical. It was magical for me for the first time I encountered a mandolin. I was maybe 6 years old, and my neighbor had one on a kitchen table or something like that. And just moving my fingers over it, and sounds comes out. I don't know if a trumpet was there on the table. I don't know if I could have done the same things.
Maybe not.
One can argue that the piano is the same, but you kind of don't see the mechanism that creates the sound in the piano as a kid, right? You have to kind of think of it, or you have to open the piano and understand how it works. So there is something indeed very intuitive, very immediate in making sound via plucking a string, which still, I honestly say, charms me, excites me, moves me till today.
A million kids could go up to a guitar or a piano or a mandolin and pluck a string. I mean, they do that in kindergarten classes, and yeah, they're entertained by it, but then they go on, playing with something else. Why do you think you were so attuned to this? What string in you did it resonate?
I think as a kid, a little bit as an adult also, I like things to happen immediately. I like when things are like, okay, I like moving fast. I'm bored quickly, which is a blessing for an artist, because if you're constantly bored, you always search for, stimulation in the music, in the phrasing as you play. I think so. But as a kid, I remember I wouldn't have patience, I can assure you, I wouldn't have patience for any other instrument that would require a lot of effort in the beginning. In other words, what I want to say is that the mandolin, the entry point is relatively quick. From 1 to 100 is faster than in other instruments that I know. Maybe from 100 to 200 is more difficult, you know what I mean? But it's just like the perfect instrument for kids. It was the perfect instrument for the kid that I was. And for another amazing coincidence, great luck, and destiny, in my hometown, in Beersheba, in Israel, this mandolin youth orchestra, led by an amazing musician, a teacher, was my first teacher, and probably the most influential persona in my musical life. And it was just so much fun to go every Friday afternoon to play music with other 30, 40 kids that play the mandolin together. That was my entry to classical music. And even when you're a beginner on the mandolin, you can play whatever, things that are simple. Together with an orchestra of other kids, it just made it sound like you're part of something much bigger. And it was a lot of fun.
Were mandolin ensembles popular throughout Israel?
Yes and no. Let me explain. So the mandolin, as I probably suggested before, is historically more of an amateur instrument. That was kind of the blessing and also the curse, it's a bit of a strong word, but that it had throughout music history. This is why, great composers that we all know did not bother to write for the mandolin, not because it wasn't popular, because it was too popular. It was a salon instrument. It was this instrument that houses had, on the wall, that they played in a salon, that they took with them on their travels. Later on, in the 20th century, it becomes even more popular as an instrument that you would play in clubs. In clubs, I mean in a choir, in an orchestra. Unlike the violin or the trumpet or the oboe or the cello, you maybe don't have to practice 4 hours a day to be able to play in an orchestra, and it would sound good. Perfect for after work, gathering, playing music with your friends or with people from the same circle of interest, social class, and so on and so forth. So mandolin orchestras were actually a very popular format across the globe. Every time I played in Alaska, I played in Patagonia, in Chile, I played in Australia, in China. Wherever I go, there's always like a group of 5, 6 people coming backstage after a concert saying, we are the mandolin orchestra of Anchorage or of Santiago de Chile or whatever. And also in Israel. So Simcha Natanzon, my first teacher, he created this orchestra in Beersheba. This is another interesting story. I mean, he's an amazing musician with an unbelievable charisma that he managed to bring the canon of mandolin playing in the city to a very, very high level. So it's not a tradition, I think, but it's pretty much because of him. And the most amazing part of the story is that he wasn't a mandolin player at all.
He's a violinist, right?
Yeah, he's a violinist. He was a violinist from the Soviet Union, and in the 70s he came to Israel. He ended up in Beersheba somehow, applying for a job as a violin professor. And then the local conservator, they told him, we already have a violin professor. But we were looking for a mandolin professor. We have these mandolins in the basement. We don't know what to do with them. Can you teach the mandolin? And just for the sake of having a job, he said, yeah, sure, I'll teach the mandolin. So
And he's probably never played a mandolin before.
No, and the funny evidence for that is the way that I or anyone in Beersheba are holding a pick, a plectrum. So the way that he, Simcha Natanzon, decided to hold a plectrum is completely off, is wrong. It's like no one is holding a pick like that. I mean, the listeners cannot see it, but I'll illustrate for the camera and maybe try to describe. So a pick is obviously a piece of plastic that you pluck with on the string, and all over the world, people hold it between the index and the thumb in this way, so it's parallel to the string. And if you see someone that hold it like that, so using 3 fingers, in a weird way, you can tell them, are you from Beersheba? And they will say yes. Guaranteed.
Wow, that's amazing. Now we're going to have to watch the right hand a lot more closely. As you're growing up in Beersheba and you're studying with this Russian violinist and playing in a mandolin choir, were you practicing every day or did you have other interests? In other words, were you a normal kid or did you play mandolin all day?
I was really normal, totally. I used to play mandolin half an hour before the lesson, so once a week. I was so not into practicing. Oh my God. I just didn't have, I mean, I was playing outside and I had friends also from the music school, but not only. And I hated practicing. I'm sorry to admit, I wish I liked it more. Now I can, I'm good at forcing myself, but when I'm playing with other people in the room, somebody has to stop me and say, like, after 3 hours, please, let's take a break. When I'm alone, I don't like it. I know how to do it now, but as a kid, forget about it. Nevertheless, it was, I think what kept me playing and enjoying it was again, the social context, playing in the mandolin orchestra, seeing how fun is that. That was a lot of fun. I think the turning point for me happened in high school, this age where everything is amplified, no? Everything, all the sensors, all the feelings are absolutely amplified. And I remember just falling in love with music in the broader sense of it. And that happened through rock music, I have to say. It was the 90s, so everything that came from Seattle, the area, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, that really kind of blew my mind. And I started to play the drums, which I still play as a hobby. The guitar I picked up, the keyboard. I had a rock band where I played the keyboard throughout high school and a little bit afterwards. And through making music, in that sense, through making rock music and just, discovering that world and harmonies and so on, I kind of fell back in love with the mandolin and started to really practice and invest in it. And of course, when you practice, you get better. When you get better, you enjoy the results and it makes you practice more. And from there, it just grew and grew from that point.
You end up at the Jerusalem Academy of Music, embarking on this career as a mandolin soloist. Did the lack of repertoire make you nervous at any point? Like, I'm just thinking as a form of employment, there are inherent problems in becoming a mandolin soloist just because there isn't a lot of music written for it. Did you have apprehension at all?
I didn't notice it in the beginning because all my teachers until I was 23 years old and went to Italy, all my teachers to that point were violinists, had no idea about original repertoire for the mandolin. All I played is violin repertoire on the mandolin. And indeed, when I graduated, I asked myself, I'm at a point where I have to decide if this is going to be my profession, my career. How can I call myself a mandolin player without playing anything that was written for the mandolin? That's true. Not a lot was written, but still. And that was the point where I decided to go to Italy to discover that part of mandolin history, or to have that part of the puzzle in my artistic life. And there, indeed, I was kind of, for 2-3 years, I was a purist of playing only original repertoire for the mandolin. Let me tell you a secret, there's not much in there. There are some beautiful, beautiful pieces, but not at that level of canon of classical music. So I guess that led me to understand that in order to kind of correct this gap in the history of the music for the mandolin, I have to go to composers, to living composers, and to pursue them to write for the mandolin. And indeed, this is something that I do until today. Every year I commission new pieces for the mandolin. I think I premiered over 100 pieces that were written for me or for the ensemble I was part of from the last 25 years. So I think now in my concerts I play a lot of violin repertoire, some flute repertoire maybe, some originals for the mandolin, and a lot of contemporary music as well.
When you're popularizing an instrument, it must be tempting to play music that is really accessible to large audience. Like, do you remember, I think we might be around the same age. I think I'm a little older. But when I was growing up, there were commercials for this guy on TV called Zamfir, Master of the Pan Flute.
Yes. Sure, classic.
So, like, I knew when I was 9 or 10 years old, I knew about the pan flute because he played Memories from Cats on it. You're doing the same thing, essentially, but you're not playing show tunes. You're playing everything from Bach to Beethoven to your own compositions. How do you manage to lure people in with music that isn't as accessible as Memories from Cats?
Wow, I'm not sure I know. I think it's sincerity would be the answer, because I play music that, I mean, if people are, choosing to have their free evening coming to my concert, dressing up, booking a babysitter, buying a ticket, coming to the concert hall, this has to be an amazing experience. I have to give them the best that I can. And so there was a lot of listening, yes, to the audience, but also to what is the best that I can, what is my thing. Everything that I play is my thing. And I think that energy that comes from this kind of sincerity in the art that I'm presenting, together with a layer of listening to the audience and what would make their evening meaningful when I come to listen to a concert, that is my compass. That is my compass. So it's not an effort to become, popular. It's not an antagonism of people that do become popular from playing this or that tune, or I have absolutely no, criticism towards that. I think that if any artist, I'm talking now as a listener, as an audience, if they're doing their thing, then I can choose I like it or I don't like it, but it's their thing, and therefore it's sincere and it's amazing.
And that sincerity is really evident when I hear you play Baroque music in particular, because it sounds loose, almost improvised. With music that is 250 years old, for example, how do you manage to get that kind of authenticity and that sincerity in music that is sometimes presented as a museum piece?
Where to start? I mean, there are so many branches to this conversation. First of all, I'll give you the simple answer, which is I was blessed to work with amazing musicians. I learned from the best. I'm still learning from the best, and it comes out in my playing. So this is my best explanation. With Baroque music, it's interesting because it's interpretation at the end, and there was this phase of the early music movement. I guess I'm talking about maybe the 70s or the 80s, where the quest was like to play the music in the way that they played it 200, 300 years ago. That was like what materials did they use, what tempo did they use, and it served its purpose. Sometimes, I feel it went too far. It's really about how you take the score. The score is our recipe. It's like you take an old recipe for pasta pomodoro. No, you can start thinking of what was the pomodoro in the 17th century in Venice and try to create the acidity and try to recreate this kind of pasta. No, the question is, how does a pasta pomodoro make you feel? And recreate this feeling. How does this slow movement of Vivaldi makes you feel? Or the Four Seasons, for example. So the idea is how to create this and not how to sound like the composer intended.
When you were studying at the Jerusalem Academy, you first heard an ensemble called Il Giardino Armonico. Tell me about that encounter and what that meant to you. Was that one of these early influences?
Oh, definitely. I remember, so I was at the music academy, and my roommate at the time was a recorder player, a Baroque nerd, really. And everything I knew about Baroque was from him. And but I was in my romantic, big concertos phase. So couldn't care about, not that I couldn't care about Baroque, but it wasn't like my thing. And I was, I think, in my first year or second year in the music academy. And so Benny is still a very good friend. He tells me one day, you have to come with me. Il Giardino Armonico are coming to town, and this is like, you have to listen to them. I was like, no, I'm tired, I don't want to. No, you absolutely have to. Okay, he literally dragged me into this concert, and I remember sitting there at a Jerusalem theater, and just when the doors of the stage opened and they burst into stage with this energy, and I remember the first violinist had this like kind of like a white shawl, things that were never seen in Jerusalem theater beforehand. And they had such a fresh, a bit of a rock and roll attitude to the music, and just a blast of energy that it was something that I've never experienced before. And that was a marker for me. Is like, okay, that's what I should be looking to recreate when I play. That kind of feeling is so valuable, and you felt it even before they started to play. And of course, they played the Vivaldi program. It was just absolutely amazing, and to the extreme. And then I went to the record shop and bought all their albums, and also another seed was installed. It's like one day, who knows? I want to play with them, and we just played in the Berlin Philharmonie yesterday together, closing a long tour that marked the release of our new album. So it's all kind of a dream coming true. Sorry for the cliche, but it was this kind of moment, yesterday at the concert hall.
Wow. Are you able to actually take in that moment, or do you have to do that well after the concert?
No, it's such an uplifting moment. I mean, look, I'm not playing for myself at that moment. I'm playing to the audience. I'm playing to the listeners. I'm playing to the public that came to the concert to experience this. So I'm completely in touch with my role here, and to do it with such an amazing group. They're all in tune to that. We're generating an artistic experience, and the energy is floating both ways, from the stage to the audience and back. This is something you feel, very easily in this kind of situation. And I was just so happy and so grateful to be able to serve with this amazing group. And there was a lot of spontaneity in the playing also, which I love. It was really wonderful.
Well, It's been so great to speak with you. And I want to take this opportunity to tell you that as beautiful of a sound as you make on the mandolin, it also strikes fear and terror in the pit of my stomach.
Oh gosh, that's terrible.
Okay, let me explain. I play at the opera, right? And there's one opera that we do, Don Giovanni, Mozart's Don Giovanni, that it has very little trumpet in it. So for a lot of it, the trumpets and the timpani are in the cafeteria or in the locker room because I have like 30 or 40 minutes off while everybody else is sawing away. And if I'm not looking at my watch, I have to be very careful because over the loudspeakers, if I hear the mandolin on stage playing that one aria, I have to drop everything that I'm doing and run because I might be late to the next thing I have to play. So I just want to let you know that the mandolin strikes fear in me.
This part of the opera, I mean, the canzonetta is for me is the best part in the best opera that Mozart wrote. I know I'm a mandolin player who's saying that, but yeah, I mean, this is such a delight part of the opera. When I lived in Italy, throughout my 20s, I always said that this canzonetta paid my rent from like 2001 to 2006 because at any given time there was a opera house in North Italy that needed a mandolin for a minute and a half. And funny enough, I just played it 2 weeks ago, literally, in a festival in Salzburg. Oh, it was so fun to play it. It's just such a sweet piece of music. I enjoyed every second of it.
Well, it's a good thing I wasn't there, or I may have just dropped my program and rushed the stage out of instinct. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Speaking Soundly. If you like what you heard, please tell your friends about it. Spread the word. Be sure to follow, rate us, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. To keep up on future episodes, follow us on Instagram at SpeakingSNDLY and visit our website, artfulnarrativesmedia.com. Tune in next week as we hear another inspiring artist speaking soundly.